That night, my daughter-in-law pointed right at the china set I hand-wrapped for her wedding and said, "Don't touch that." The words pinned me like a cold brooch because I knew every hand-painted stroke, every hidden mark on that set. 3 days later, I discovered it had been swapped. An appraisal paper for 6 figures was in my name, but the signature was not mine. You think you know the rest? Trust me, you do not. My name is Eleanor Pike, and I am 61 years old. I live by a simple truth: the most significant battles are rarely fought with raised voices. They are fought in the silences, in the careful placement of objects, in the things left unsaid. That evening, the battle lines were being drawn on a glass shelf in Westlake, Ohio. The dinner was at my son's house, a sterile, beautiful box of glass and white walls that always felt cold to me, no matter the season. It was Sloane's house, really. My son, Lucas, just lived there. At 34, Lucas still possessed a gentleness that, in his wife's presence, often curdled into simple passivity. He hovered by the kitchen island, tracing the grout lines in the marble with his fingernail. A man adrift in his own home. Sloane, his wife of 3 years, was 32 and meticulously curated. Tonight, she was wearing a cashmere sweater the colour of oatmeal and a smile that was just as bland and insulating. She managed every aspect of their lives with a terrifying, quiet efficiency. I had offered to help clear the table, a habit from a life where people actually touched their own dishes. I carried 2 plates toward the dining room, where the tall, museum-style cabinet stood. Inside, illuminated by a harsh interior light, sat the marigold crown china. It was my grandmother's set, the only thing of true value she had managed to keep. I had given it to them on their wedding day, a significant, tangible piece of their heritage. My hand instinctively went to the glass door handle, just to feel the connection. "Don't touch that." Sloane's voice cut through the air. It was not loud. It was sharp, precise, and absolutely cold. I froze. My hand was still in the air. Lucas flinched near the sink, a quick, aborted movement, before he turned his back to us, pretending to rinse a glass. I was just going to admire it. "Sloane," I said, keeping my voice soft. "It's just, the shelves are calibrated. The humidity is balanced," she said, walking smoothly from the kitchen. She placed herself between me and the cabinet, a polite, oatmeal-coloured barrier. It's best left undisturbed. I held her gaze, and in that moment, I let my eyes move past her face, past the glare on the glass, and I truly looked at the china. I, who had polished every piece by hand as a girl, knew its soul. My focus sharpened. A luncheon plate, third from the top, had a fine hairline crack near the rim, a tiny, dark web. That was wrong. It had been pristine when I gave it to them. Then I saw the piece beneath it, the maker's mark. A small, intricate stamp was facing outward. It was placed backward, displayed, when the entire point of the marigold crown's craftsmanship was that the mark was hidden underneath, a private signature. This was not a display choice. This was an error, or it was a replacement. Before I could speak, Sloane's mother, Marissa Alder, swept in from the patio, a cloud of expensive perfume and entitlement. Marissa was the blueprint from which Sloane had been built, only louder and edged in gold. "Darling," Marissa boomed, gesturing with her wine glass. I was just finalizing the press release for the Alder Conservatory fundraiser this weekend. Everyone is buzzing, and that divine china set She pointed at the cabinet, will be the absolute star of the heritage auction display. A true treasure from the family. Sloane's smile tightened, but she nodded at her mother. Of course. Mother. That's why I'm being so protective of it. Heritage. Family. My family. My heritage. Being presented as hers. Lucas remained silent at the sink, the sound of running water filling the space he refused to occupy. Sloane adjusted a picture frame on the sideboard, her body still physically blocking my path to the cabinet. She had drawn a line in her polished white house, and the china was on her side. I lowered my hand and gave her the polite, meaningless smile of a 61-year-old widow who knows her audience. It sounds like a very important evening. Sloane, I said. But as I turned back to the kitchen, I was memorizing the reversed insignia, the fresh crack, the desperation. I have learned to listen to what people are trying to hide. You just have to watch what they are working so hard to show off. Sloane thinks my life began and ended with being Lucas's mother. She sees a quiet widow who runs a small community arts centre, someone who can be managed. She is wrong. Before my husband passed, and long before I opened the Harbour Light Arts Lodge, I spent 2 decades in the climate-controlled basements of the Riverton Art Museum. My official title was Archive Manager, but my real job was being the keeper of stories, the guardian of provenance. Provenance is not just a list of owners. It is the life of an object. It is the grease stain on the back of a canvas, the microscopic chip from where it was dropped in 1920, the slight variation in a painter's signature that proves it was made in winter, not spring. My eyes were trained to see the things that did not belong. I spent my days with loupes and ultraviolet lights, differentiating an 18th century glaze from a clever 20th century forgery. I can tell you if a brushstroke was confident or hesitant, original or imitation. Sloane sees a china set. I see a history she is trying to rewrite. That hairline crack, the backward-facing maker's mark, those were not just imperfections. They were alarms. The marigold crown set was my grandmother's. It survived a fire, the Great Depression, and 3 generations of turbulent family dinners. It was not priceless in the way Marissa Alder meant. It was priceless because it held our history. When I gave it to Lucas and Sloane at their wedding, it was not a transaction. It was a transfer of trust. I included a handwritten letter detailing its journey, explaining the meaning of the marigold pattern endurance and fidelity. The only condition I attached was a sentimental one, spoken quietly to Lucas before the ceremony. This is to be kept in the family. It is to be used, loved, and eventually passed down. It is not an asset. It is not for show. Sloane's grip on my son started subtly. It began with upgrading his wardrobe, then refining his friendships. Soon, she began to curate his relationship with me. My visits, once spontaneous and warm, became scheduled events, subject to their social calendar. Lucas, caught between the woman he married and the mother who raised him, chose the path of least resistance. He chose silence. I learned to stop trying. I stopped asking him to lunch, stopped offering to help with the garden he used to love. I stopped pushing against the polished, unyielding wall Sloane had built around him. Instead, I stepped back, and I watched. I am no longer the pleading mother-in-law. I am the archivist. I observe. I document. I wait. As Marissa's fundraiser for the Alder Conservatory loomed, Sloane's behavior shifted from controlling to frantic. The emails about the event became more breathless, the social media posts more staged. Her insistence on protecting the china which had previously sat forgotten in their cabinet, suddenly became a priority. The command, "Don't touch that," was not about preservation. It was about fear. A hairline crack, a backward mark, a fundraiser needing a star attraction, a daughter-in-law desperate to impress a demanding mother. To me, this was not a simple family misunderstanding. This was a file I needed to open. Sloane was not protecting the china. She was hiding something about it. That night, as I drove home from their cold, silent house, I knew what I had to do. There would be no confrontation, no tearful phone calls to Lucas. I would simply verify the provenance. I would conduct a quiet, thorough audit of my own family history. 2 days later, I returned. I brought a lemon poppy seed loaf, still warm, an offering of peace that was really a key. Sloane was distracted, on the phone with a florist, arguing about the shade of hydrangeas. "Eleanor, I'm buried. Can this wait?" "Of course, dear. I just thought, with so much going on, you might need help in the kitchen." I could dust, maybe polish the silver. She waved a hand dismissively, her focus already back on the phone. "Fine. Yes. Thank you. Just don't move anything in the cabinet." "I wouldn't dream of it," I murmured. I waited. I wiped counters that were already clean. I listened to her footsteps fade as she went upstairs to her office, the door clicking shut. Lucas was at work. Marissa was, thankfully, absent. I was alone with the evidence. I moved to the cabinet, sliding the glass door open. The air inside smelled faintly of new paint, not old porcelain. I reached for the luncheon plate, the one with the crack. It felt light in my hands, too light. I pulled the small, high-intensity penlight from my purse, the one I used for reading archive labels. I angled the beam across the surface. The glaze was glassy, hard, and perfect, reflecting the light like a mirror. The original marigold crown had a soft, almost velvety finish, the result of a specific 1920s firing technique. This was a modern reproduction, and the crack was painted on, a clumsy attempt at faux antiquity. I put it down and picked up one of the teacups. I turned it over. My breath caught. The maker's mark was stamped, not painted, and the kiln code read 4BR. I knew that code. It was from a batch the company produced in the 1990s, a pale imitation of the original line. I checked another. The same. 2 of the cups had been swapped. My hands were perfectly steady. I took out my phone, activated the macro lens, and began my real work. Click. A shot of the false kiln code. Click. A close-up of the painted-on crack. I found another piece, a saucer, that had a small, rough patch near the rim, as if the original gold leaf had been scraped away. Click. I put every piece back, aligning them to the millimeter. My next stop was the garage. It was organized to Sloane's exacting standards, everything in labeled grey bins. But in the far corner, pushed behind the lawnmower, was a large cardboard shipping box. It was open. Inside a cascade of white packing peanuts. I dug my hand in. My fingers brushed against cardboard. It was a receipt, folded small, Westlake Antique Mall, dated 3 weeks ago. The item line was non-specific, assorted porcelain, as is. The price $150. I photographed the receipt. I returned to the kitchen. Sloane's command center was a small, built-in desk. A neat stack of mail sat in a silver tray. I flipped through it. Bills, catalogues, and a thick envelope from their homeowner's insurance provider. It was already open. I slipped out the contents. A new declarations page. A rider. My eyes scanned the text. Item, marigold crown china set. 12 pieces. Appraised value $100,000. $100,000. For a set that was now part imitation. The authorization for the rider, listed clearly, was Sloane M. Pike. Tucked behind it was a printed-out email from Marissa to Sloane. Subject, Alder Foundation Logistics. The message was brief. Sloane. The appraisers must finalize the valuation this week. The foundation needs the documentation for the auction prospectus. We cannot look poor. Mom. I looked up. Lucas was standing in the doorway, his briefcase in his hand. He looked exhausted. What are you doing with our mail? Sloane must have heard his voice, because she appeared almost instantly, her face tight. Eleanor? I thought you were dusting. I held up the insurance rider, my voice calm. I was just tidying this stack. I see you had the china reappraised. 100,000. That's quite an increase. Sloane snatched the paper from my hand. It's a preliminary valuation. For insurance, obviously. Standard procedure before a high-profile loan. I looked past her, directly at my son. Lucas, does the set look different to you at all? The color, perhaps. He glanced at the cabinet, then at Sloane, then at the floor. I don't know. Mom? It looks fine. Sloane. It's being professionally restored. Sloane cut in, her voice like ice. A few pieces needed stabilization before the event. It's necessary. Restored. Stabilized. Swapped. I see, I said. I gathered my purse and my cake pan. Well, I'll let you get back to it. Don't work too hard. I did not go straight home. I drove to my bank and opened my safe deposit box. I retrieved the faded velvet portfolio where I keep my most important documents. Inside was the original handwritten card I had given them on their wedding day, detailing the set's history and my hopes for its future in their family. At the bottom, beneath my signature, were theirs. Lucas Pike and Sloane Mercer Pike. A signed acknowledgement of the gift. Proof of provenance. I put the original letter in my purse. The next step was ready. The next morning. I was not at the Arts Lodge. I was in a high-rise office downtown, sitting across from Ariel Porter. Ariel is a lawyer. But more importantly, she is precise. She doesn't waste time on emotion, which is why I hired her. I laid out the photos, the insurance rider, and the copy of the wedding gift card. She's swapped them. Ariel. At least some of them. And she's inflated the value for insurance. Ariel steepled her fingers, her eyes scanning the documents. Okay. Eleanor. Let's establish the baseline. The china was a wedding gift. It's legally community property, belonging to both Lucas and Sloane. She has a right to possess it, even to insure it. But not to replace it with fakes. I said. No. Ariel agreed. Not to replace it. And certainly not to commit insurance fraud. But that's hard to prove without a confrontation. What's the real endgame here? Why the charade? This insurance valuation. She tapped the $100,000 figure. This isn't just for protection. This is for leverage. People inflate value when they want to borrow against an asset. She swiveled in her chair and typed. As a former archivist, I appreciate a woman who knows her way around a database. She wouldn't need your signature just for insurance, Ariel mused, her eyes scanning the screen. But if she tried to use it as collateral, and the provenance clearly traces back to the Pike family, here we go. She turned the monitor toward me, My stomach tightened. It was a UCC1 financing statement, a public notice, a lien. The debtor was listed as Sloan Mercer Pike. The secured party was a company I'd never heard of, Pinecrest Lending, LLC. And in the box describing the collateral, my blood ran cold. 12-piece porcelain set. Marigold crown, est. Value $100,000. They filed it 2 weeks ago, Ariel said, her voice flat. She got a loan against your grandmother's china. But that was not the worst part. Ariel clicked a link, opening an attached document. It was a supplemental affidavit of ownership, required by Pinecrest because the asset was a known heirloom. And at the bottom was a signature, Eleanor Pike. It was a clumsy, pathetic imitation. The E was too round, the P too sharp. It was the signature of someone who had seen my name on a Christmas card and tried to copy it. She had forged my name to secure a loan. This is the Alder Foundation's event, I said, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening snap. The fundraiser, Marissa's press release. Sloan needed cash to make the event happen to pay the caterers, the florists. She took out a personal loan using my family's china as the guarantee. And Pinecrest Lending isn't a bank. Eleanor, Ariel said, already pulling up their corporate records. This is a hard money lender. They deal in quick cash at high interest. They will have no patience. The threat was immediate. The fundraiser, the heritage auction display. Marissa was so proud of, it was not just a display. It was Sloane's deadline. If she could not pay Pinecrest back, she would use the fundraiser to sell the china, pay her debt, and cover her tracks. She would sell my grandmother's legacy, fakes and all, to the highest bidder to save herself from public humiliation. We can't just send a cease and desist, I said, my mind racing. Sloane will destroy the real pieces. She'll claim I'm a vindictive mother-in-law. Exactly, Ariel said. You can't. But the Riverton Art Museum can. You need to close the loopholes. Eleanor, you need to make that china's identity so public, so ironclad, that she cannot sell it, auction it, or even move it without setting off an alarm. You have to take control of the provenance. I knew exactly who to call. I left Ariel's office and phoned Mason Hale. Mason and I had spent 15 years working side by side in the Riverton archives. He understood the language of porcelain better than he understood most people. Mason, I said, walking briskly down the sidewalk. It's Eleanor. I need a professional favor. Do you remember the marigold crown set I used to tell you about, the 1926 batch with the off-center marigold stamp on the gravy boat? He replied, without missing a beat. The very one. I need you to pull the file. I am formally requesting a provenance verification and a trace entry into the community collection database. There was a pause. Mason knew what that meant. It was one step short of reporting an item stolen. It tagged the set on a public register, warning auction houses and collectors. Consider it done. Eleanor, he said, his voice serious. I'll prepare the full documentation, kiln codes, glaze composition, the works. It will be indisputable. One more thing. Mason, I need an independent appraiser. The best one you know for 20th century porcelain. And I need them available this Saturday night. Sharp. At the Alder Conservatory. I hung up. The trap was set. Sloane wanted to use the fundraiser to solve her problem. I would use it to solve mine. Marissa Alder did not just want a fundraiser. She wanted a coronation. The Alder Conservatory, her personal monument to her own generosity, was the stage, and Sloane was the lead actress. This event, as Marissa had announced far too loudly at a recent luncheon, was to be Sloane's official debut into Westlake society. The idea was absurd. Sloane had lived in Westlake for 3 years, but in Marissa's world, an existence did not count unless it was chronicled in the society pages. The pressure on Sloane must have been immense. She had promised her mother a centerpiece, a hook. She had guaranteed the presence of a rare family heirloom to draw in the high-dollar donors. She had promised my grandmother's china. The local Westlake Gazette was complicit. Of course. I saw the preview article at the grocery store checkout, folded neatly between the tabloids. Sloane Mercer Pike, local patron, to showcase remarkable family heritage at Alder Conservatory Gala. The photograph they used was from a different event, showing Sloane in a black dress, smiling with practiced ease, looking every inch the poised, generous benefactor. A patron. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. She was a debtor, propped up by forgery and a $150 replica. While the Gazette was singing her praises, Pinecrest Lending was sharpening its knives. Ariel had set up a quiet alert on any new correspondence filed with the UCC-1. A new email had been logged. It was not a polite reminder. It was standardized, brutal, and utterly final. Payment overdue. Failure to remit balance in full by Saturday at 5 p.m. will result in immediate seizure of collateral as described. This was Thursday. Sloane had less than 48 hours. I had to know what Lucas knew. I called him. Using the pretext of a loose gutter at my house he had promised to look at for months. He arrived looking like a ghost, the skin around his eyes papery and strained. He paced my kitchen, refusing to sit. "You look exhausted, Lucas?" I said, handing him a coffee he did not take. "It's just this fundraiser." He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It's taken on a life of its own. The costs they're much higher than Sloane anticipated." "What costs?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, the voice of a concerned mother, not an investigator. "Everything, the lighting, the security for the displays, the catering. And Sloane. She had a small investment in a social media marketing firm that went under last month. Just terrible timing. She's scrambling to cover the difference." So that was the story. A failed investment. It was cleaner, more modern, than the truth I forged your mother's name to a hard moneylender to pay for a party. He had no idea. He saw a stressed wife, not a cornered forger. He saw a cash flow problem, not a moral catastrophe. "She seems very determined to make her mother happy," I offered. Lucas let out a short, bitter laugh. "She just doesn't want to be a disappointment. You know, Marissa. We must set the standard. Sloane. Don't embarrass me. Sloane." He was quoting her, his voice weary. He was exhausted by the performance, but he was still willing to hold the curtain. His anxiety was a low hum in my kitchen. He knew, instinctively, that something was deeply wrong. But he was too afraid of the confrontation to ask the questions that would unravel his carefully constructed life. I watched my son, a 34-year-old man, still trapped by the fear of disappointing the women in his life. I saw the cycle, the toxic pattern Marissa had perfected and passed down. It was the crushing, relentless pursuit of appearances. First, the desperate need to project success. Second, the reckless, unsustainable spending to maintain the illusion. And third, the frantic, panicked scramble to borrow, hide, and lie to cover the debt before the illusion shattered. I could have stopped it. The thought was clear and sharp. I had enough in my own accounts to call Pinecrest lending and wipe the slate clean. I could buy back my grandmother's china and my son's peace of mind with a single wire transfer. But that would not be a rescue. It would be enablement. It would teach Sloane nothing, except that I was a safety net, a resource to be tapped when her schemes inevitably failed. It would teach Lucas that his silence was a valid, successful strategy. No, I would not save them with money. I would not patch the hole in their sinking ship. I would present the truth. I would set a boundary, sharp and clear as the glass on that cabinet. The fundraiser would proceed, and I would be there. Friday was a day of logistics. I sat at my desk at the Harbourlight Lodge, not managing art supplies, but marshalling facts. First, the data. I backed up every photograph from my phone, the false kiln codes, the painted crack, the antique store receipt onto an offline, encrypted hard drive. I added a scan of the original wedding gift card, with both their signatures. I labelled the drive Pike Marigold Provenance and placed it in my bank's safe deposit box. A copy went to Ariel Porter. My next call was to Ariel. "The gala is tomorrow night," I said. "Pinecrest's deadline is 5 p.m. She's going to try and sell it, Ariel, or auction it. I'm ready." Ariel's voice was clipped, professional. "The moment you give the word? Or the moment we see any public auction listing? I file the emergency injunction based on the signature forgery. It will freeze the asset. Pinecrest won't be able to touch it, and Sloane won't be able to sell it." My second call was to Mason Hale at the museum. "Is the appraiser confirmed?" "Mason Dr. Aris," he confirmed. "The best. He will be at the Alder Conservatory at 7:30 p.m. He believes he is there to validate a donation. He has the full provenance report you and I prepared, ready to be made public." My third call was to the insurance agent, Mr. Davies, the man whose name was on the policy Lucas and Sloane held. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice heavy with concern. "I am Eleanor Pike. I am the original grantor of the Marigold Crown china set. I have reason to believe the security at the Alder Conservatory event is insufficient for an item of that valuation. Furthermore, I have serious concerns about the recent appraisal. As a party of interest, I am formally requesting you attend the unveiling to conduct an on-site risk assessment." He sputtered, mentioning client confidentiality. I cut him off. "If that set is damaged, auctioned, or found to be fraudulent while under your policy, the liability will be enormous. I am offering you a chance to verify your asset in person. 7:30 p.m. He agreed. That evening, I drove to my son's house. Sloane was out. A final dress fitting. Lucas was in the garage, ostensibly tidying, but mostly just moving boxes from one side to the other. "Lucas." He jumped. "Mom? I didn't hear you. I did not waste time. Tomorrow night, at the gala, Sloane is going to present the china." "I know. Mom. It's for the display. It's more than that. And I am going to stop it. I know what has been done. I know about the pieces that have been swapped." His face went white. He knew. He did not know the details, but he knew. "Mum, please," he whispered, refusing to look at me. "Don't. It will ruin her. It will ruin us. The truth doesn't ruin people. Lucas. Hiding from it does." I put my hand on his arm. "I am not asking you to choose me over your wife. I am asking you to choose truth over a performance. When they bring the box out, I am going to step forward. If you want to stand on the side of the truth, I need you to stand next to me." He looked at the floor. His shoulders slumped. He looked trapped. Finally, after a long, agonizing silence, he gave a single, jerky nod. Saturday, the day of the gala. I arrived at the Alder Conservatory at 3 p.m., hours before the guests, holding my volunteer badge. Marissa was in the lobby, directing staff like a stressed general. I found the main hall. The display case was already in place, tall and empty. While staff argued over tablecloths, I moved to the case. My hand slipped under the cheap velvet lining of the pedestal, placing the small, white AirTag. It was flat, invisible. The china arrived via a bonded courier at 4. I watched them unload the crate. Sloane, arriving in a flurry of stress. Supervised. Sloane, I said, approaching calmly. I know how particular you are about the placement. Let me arrange them. I know the set better than anyone. She looked at me, suspicious, then at the clock, then at her mother, who was waving frantically. She was out of time. Fine. Just be careful. They opened the crate. I was left alone with my grandmother's china. My hands were steady. I pulled the small, pen-like UV light and the matching invisible ink marker from my purse. I picked up the first real piece of teacup. I found the hidden kiln stamp. I made a tiny, imperceptible dot. 1, the gravy boat. 2, the large platter. 3. I worked quickly, marking only the 8 remaining authentic pieces. The 4 fakes, the cracked plate. The wrong code saucers I left untouched. I arranged the full set. It looked beautiful. A perfect lie. I closed the glass door. I smoothed my dress, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. Everything was in place. All the players were moving toward the stage I had set. All I had to do was wait for the curtain. I just had to let the light do its work. The Alder Conservatory was glittering, awash in champagne and the sound of false laughter. I stood near the back, a quiet widow in a simple navy dress, watching Marissa Alder take the stage. She was magnificent in emerald green, her voice booming across the packed hall. "We are here tonight," Marissa declared, "to celebrate heritage, to celebrate the elegance and the permanence of true style. It is not just about art, but about legacy." On cue, Sloane, looking pale but poised in silver, gave a small, tight signal to the staff. 2 men in white gloves carefully wheeled the tall, illuminated display case to the center of the stage. The marigold crown set sat inside, gleaming under the spotlights. And as the centerpiece of our heritage display, Marissa continued, gesturing dramatically. My daughter, Sloane, and my son-in-law, Lucas, have generously loaned a priceless family heirloom. This was the moment. I stepped forward from the shadows. "Excuse me? Marissa." My voice was not loud, but it was clear, and it cut through the room. The chatter stopped. Marissa froze, her smile hardening. Sloane's head whipped toward me. I saw Lucas, standing near the side of the stage. He looked like he was going to be sick, but he met my eyes. He gave that small, jerky nod. I walked to the stage steps, projecting calm concern. "Marissa? Sloane. Forgive me. This is just standard procedure." I turned to the audience, my voice polite. As the original grantor of this set, and with an item of this supposed value, $100,000, I believe I'm sure you'll all understand that we must have a final insurance verification before it's officially displayed or offered. Marissa's face tightened. "Eleanor, this is highly irregular. This is my event. It's a simple risk assessment. A new voice said. Mr. Davies, the insurance agent, stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but professional. Mrs. Pike requested I be here to verify the asset. It will only take a moment. We must protect the policy. Sloane had no choice. To refuse would be an admission of guilt. Of course, she said, her voice a thin thread. A formality. Excellent. I said, I've also taken the liberty of having a porcelain specialist from the Riverton Museum, Mr. Mason Hale, and an independent appraiser, Dr. Aris, here to assist. Mason and Dr. Aris moved toward the stage. Sloane's colour drained completely. She looked like a ghost in her silver dress. If you could please dim the house lights, Dr. Aris said, his voice all business. The room darkened. The only light came from the display case. Now, the case lights. If you please. The case went dark. The room held its breath. Dr. Aris clicked on a large, hand-held ultraviolet lamp. He directed the deep purple beam at the china. A gasp went through the room. On the shelves, 8 of the pieces, the gravy boat, the large platter, 7 cups, and the tureen glowed with tiny, brilliant, blue-white dots right where the kiln marks were. The other 4 pieces, the cracked plate and 3 saucers, remained dead, inert, absorbing the light. Well, Dr. Aris said dryly, that's unambiguous. We have a significant discrepancy in the composition. If I may, Mason Hale added, stepping forward with a tablet. We ran the provenance. 8 of these pieces match the Riverton's public file for the Marigold Crown, 1926 batch. The unique kiln codes are a perfect match. He pointed to the 4 dark pieces. These other 4, however, are 1990s-era reproductions. The kiln codes are incorrect, and the glaze contains modern polymers. They are fakes. The whispering in the crowd erupted. Marissa's face was a mask of cold fury, her eyes boring into her daughter. I stepped up, holding a single, laminated card. The set has been compromised, I said, my voice resonating with quiet, unshakable authority. And this, I held up the card, is my original deed of gift, signed by both Sloane and Lucas, acknowledging receipt of the complete, authentic set. Mr. Davies, the insurance agent, was scribbling furiously. I am noting, he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear, a significant risk of material misrepresentation. Any sale of this set under the current policy would be considered fraudulent. All eyes went to Sloane. She was trembling, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. And then, the voice I had been waiting for spoke. Lucas. He stepped away from the wall, moving to stand beside me. He looked, for the first time in years, not at his wife, but at her. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of his broken trust. Sloane, he asked, what did you do with the rest of it? What did you do with my grandmother's china? Sloane stared at him, her world collapsing. I just, she stammered, the practiced poise shattering. I just borrowed them. They needed a glaze repair. It was just a temporary repair. The stage was cleared in chaos. Marissa, her face a thundercloud, hissed at a staff member, get them backstage. Now. We were led to a small, cold dressing room. The air was thick with the smell of old makeup and new disaster. Sloane sank onto a stool, her silver dress pooling around her. Lucas stood near the door, his arms crossed, a new hardness in his eyes. Marissa began to pace. Before Marissa could speak, the door opened, and Ariel Porter walked in, holding a slim file. She nodded at me. "Who the hell are you?" Marissa snapped. "This is my legal counsel." "Ariel Porter," I said calmly. Ariel stepped forward and placed a single sheet of paper on the table in front of Sloane. It was the UCC1 lien. Sloane Pike. Ariel began, her voice devoid of emotion. "This is a financing statement from Pinecrest Lending, filed 2 weeks ago, securing a loan against the Marigold Crown China." She then placed a second document beside it, the affidavit of ownership. "And this," Ariel said, tapping the bottom line, "is the signature provided to the lender, Eleanor Pike." She looked at me. "Eleanor, is this your signature?" "No," I said. Lucas lunged forward, snatching the paper. He stared at the clumsy forgery. "Sloane," he breathed. "You signed my mother's name. I was going to pay it back." Sloane cried, her voice cracking. "I was going to pay it back before anyone knew the fundraiser, the costs. The caterer demanded payment up front. So you pawned my grandmother's china." Lucas's voice was dangerously quiet. "Only 4 pieces," she insisted. "Just 4. I found replicas. The man at the shop said no one would know. It was just to cover the deposit. I thought I could get them back after the auction proceeds came in." "You thought?" Marissa finally exploded, her voice a low hiss. "You thought I told you not to disappoint me. Sloane, I told you not to fail in front of these people. You have humiliated this family." I looked directly at Marissa, my voice cutting through her tirade. "She just confessed to fraud and forgery, Marissa, and all you heard was that she embarrassed you in public. You have just confirmed, in front of witnesses, that you care only about appearances, not about right or wrong." Marissa's mouth snapped shut. Lucas was staring at Sloane, a look of dawning, sickening realization on his face. "All those other times," he said, his voice hollow. "The silver tray you said was being polished. The pearl earrings you said were being reset. Was this the first time, Sloane? Or just the first time you got caught?" Sloane's silence was a complete confession. He turned away from her, a small, pained sound escaping him. Ariel stepped back in. "Let me be very clear about the legal situation," she said, addressing Sloane directly. "You have committed wire fraud by transmitting false information to an insurance provider. You have committed forgery by falsifying Mrs. Pike's signature on a legal loan document. These are criminal offences. We have more than enough evidence to proceed with a formal complaint." Sloane flinched, looking at the door as if she might bolt. "But that is not my first choice," I said. The room fell silent. "I am not interested in ruining you. Sloane, I am interested in boundaries. I laid out my terms. They were not negotiable. First, the 4 original, authentic pieces of my china will be returned, undamaged, within 72 hours. Second, the UCC1 lien with Pinecrest Lending is to be satisfied and cancelled immediately. Third, you and Lucas will financially separate. He needs to be protected from your debts. Fourth, I want a formal, notarized letter of apology from you, admitting what you did. And fifth, you will never again move, sell, loan, or restore that china set without my physical presence and written consent." I paused. "If you fail to meet any one of these conditions, Ariel will file the criminal and civil complaints on Monday morning, along with the full provenance report from the Riverton Museum, which will be sent to every major auction house and newspaper in the state." Sloane finally looked up, her face streaked with tears, her bravado gone, leaving only a terrified, hollowed-out young woman. "He'll seize the china," she whispered, looking at Marissa. Pinecrest. He'll take it. I can't pay him back. That is your mother's problem to solve, I said. Sloane's body slumped, a marionette with its strings cut. I was so afraid, she whispered, her gaze distant. I was so afraid of her. I looked at her, not with pity, but with a cold, clear finality. It is time, I said, that you became more afraid of the person you see in the mirror. The days that followed were not filled with shouting matches or dramatic reversals. They were quiet, precise, and administrative. The mess was settled with the clean, cold efficiency of lawyers and wire transfers. Before 9 a.m. on Monday, Pinecrest Lending received the full payoff for Sloane's loan, plus a staggering early termination fee. The transfer was initiated from one of Marissa Alder's private holding companies. In exchange, Pinecrest signed a non-disclosure agreement, burying the forgery and the default. Marissa had purchased her daughter's silence. At 10:30 a.m., I stood on the loading dock of the Alder Conservatory. Ariel was beside me. Mason Hale, acting as an official witness for the Riverton Museum, held a clipboard. A secured van delivered a sealed crate. Mason broke the seal and began his inventory, one by one. He inspected the 4 missing pieces, the 2 teacups, the luncheon plate, and the saucer using his portable UV light. He checked the unique, hand-painted kiln codes against his digital file. They are the 1926 originals, he announced, his voice echoing slightly in the empty bay. They are authentic and undamaged. He carefully packed them with the other 8 original pieces, which had been held in the conservatory's vault overnight. The 4 cheap replicas from the Westlake Antique Mall were left on the empty loading dock. By noon, Ariel had filed the official letter confirming the UCC1 lien had been satisfied and removed. The marigold crown set was legally free and clear. She then handed me a single, crisp envelope. Inside was Sloane's statement, typed on heavy bond paper. It was a sterile, passionless admission of the facts, the forgery, the pledging of the asset, the substitution. Sloane's signature at the bottom was stark and clear, pressed beside the embossed seal of a notary public. It was not an apology, it was a legal confession, and it was exactly what I had required. Lucas, it turned out, did not need my guidance to find his spine. That same afternoon, he went to his own lawyer. He had new bank accounts opened in his name only and set up an automatic transfer for his half of the mortgage. He presented Sloane with a post-nuptial financial separation agreement. He did not threaten to leave. He simply stated a new fact: his financial future would no longer be tied to hers. He also told her he had scheduled their first appointment with a marriage counselor for Wednesday. Marissa tried desperately to control the narrative. She fed a story to the Westlake Gazette about a last-minute generous donation that had allowed the fundraiser to exceed its goals, explaining away the china's sudden removal. But the reporters, smelling the smoke from the previous night's fire, were wary. They called the Alder Conservatory, asking about the public confrontation. The conservatory's board, clearly distancing themselves from their founder, issued a curt statement. The conservatory declines to comment on the personal affairs of its donors. The story died, not with a bang, but a whimper. I spent that evening creating a complete file. I scanned the forged affidavit, the Pinecrest lien, the antique store receipt, the withdrawal confirmation, and Sloane's notarized confession. I made a full copy. When Lucas came to my house, I handed it to him. "This is your copy," I said. "It is not a weapon. Lucas, it is a shield. It is the truth, so that you are never again forced to live inside someone else's lie. He held the folder, the weight of it seeming to settle him. Thank you, Mum. A day later. My phone lit up with a text message from Sloane. I start therapy on Friday. I'm not going just to save our marriage. I'm going to try and save what's left of me. I read the words, but I did not reply. On Saturday, Lucas came to the Harbourlight Arts Lodge. He brought his toolbox, the crate containing the complete 12-piece marigold crown set was on the floor. For 2 hours, we worked in comfortable silence, assembling a new, high-security display cabinet in the lodge's quietest corner. When it was done, I placed each piece inside, the velvet lining muffling any sound. I locked the case. From my pocket, I took a small, engraved brass plaque. I affixed it to the wooden base. Marigold crown set. Pike family property. Not for auction, not for transfer. It was finished. The asset was secure. The consequences had been delivered. But as I looked at the china safe behind its new wall of glass, a final cold realization settled in. A label is just a request. A lock is just a delay. This was not a permanent solution. I had one last decision to make. The Alder Conservatory's closing reception was a much more subdued affair. The main fundraiser had been a financial success, thanks to Marissa's damage control. But the social victory she craved had evaporated. I saw Sloane approach the small stage, her face pale, a note card trembling in her hand. She was preparing to make her public apology, before she could take the first step. Marissa gripped her arm, her fingers digging into Sloane's elbow. "We do not apologize," Marissa whispered. A command, sharp as glass. "We endure. We forget. We move on." Sloane froze, caught again between her mother's will and her own conscience. I decided then. I walked past them both and stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening," I said. The room quieted. "I am Eleanor Pike. I have one final announcement regarding the fundraiser's heritage display." Marissa looked relieved, assuming I was there to smooth things over, to participate in the polite lie. The marigold crown china set, which caused such a stir the other night, has been a lesson for my family. A lesson in truth, and in the difference between value and worth. I looked out at the small crowd, finding Lucas near the back, to honor that lesson, and to protect the set's true purpose. I am announcing tonight that the complete 12-piece set is being placed on permanent, indefinite loan to the Harbourlight Arts Lodge. It will be displayed publicly, in its entirety, under the name of the woman who first cherished it, my grandmother. A polite, confused applause trickled through the room. "This loan," I continued, my voice steady, "comes with a permanent, legally binding condition. The set cannot be moved, loaned, sold, or altered by any single party. Its security and location can only be changed with the notarized, joint signatures of both myself and my son, Lucas Pike. It is no longer a private asset to be leveraged by any organization." Mason Hale, who was standing by, stepped forward. "The Riverton Museum confirms it will oversee the public provenance file, ensuring these conditions are permanently attached to the item's history. Mr. Davies, the insurance agent, also stepped up. And our firm has issued a new policy rider, effective immediately, which insulates the asset from any future marital disputes or third-party liens." I looked back at Lucas. This was his moment. He walked forward, past his mother-in-law, past his wife, and stood beside me at the podium. He picked up the pen attached to the document Ariel had prepared. He signed his name firmly. He then turned, not to me, but to Sloane. His voice was not angry, it was just clear. From now on, Sloane, he said, every decision we make starts with the truth. No more hiding. It was too much for Marissa. It was a public declaration that her control was broken. With a sharp exhale of disgust, she turned and walked out of the conservatory. The sharp, bitter click of her high heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the room. Sloane watched her mother go. She looked, for a moment, like a lost child. Then she looked at me, her eyes filled with a raw, painful gratitude. She was trembling. "Thank you, Eleanor," she whispered, so low only I could hear. "Thank you for keeping me from slipping further." I gave a small nod. I stepped back to the microphone for the last time. "A gift," I said to the room, "is not a sacrifice to be fed to appearances. It is a family's memory." The lights in the hall dimmed, and a single, warm spotlight illuminated the new display case at the Harbour Light Lodge, miles away, where the china sat, finally safe. The knot was untangled, not with anger, but with boundaries, not with revenge, but with the simple, unyielding pressure of the truth. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are listening from, so please, drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like, and if you can, support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear these stories.